But now we have someone who's actually here, and we're so pleased that our brother Wissam Nasrallah from the Lebanese Society for Education and Social Development is here. I'm just going to ask him to come and share his heart about Lebanon, and then we're going to have some minutes to pray together afterwards. Thank you, Wissam.
Good evening. It's so good to be with you after a long break. Usually the Lebanese delegation is much numerous at the EBF, but it falls upon me today to be representing my fellow Lebanese colleagues. I convey greetings on behalf of the Lebanese Baptist Convention and LSESD. We'll be watching a 2-minute video, and then I'll be commenting on that.
Every day, people ask, "Are you okay?" Define okay, I reply. The 2 hours gas station lines have stretched to 8 hours. Some sleep overnight in their cars, only to be told, "The gas station is closed now, try tomorrow." If we can fill our car with gasoline and buy bread the same day, then we consider that a productive day. The long queues soak up our every free moment. However, even our small survival stockpiles can quickly disappear. For example, my neighborhood generator was shut down for 3 days because we ran out of fuel. This ruined all the food in my freezer. I couldn't even cook it because we are out of cooking gas as well. We might be surviving, but what about our children? What about the sick? Our children don't know if they can go to school this year. Without fuel, parents and teachers can't make it to school. Without electricity, we have no Wi-Fi for online learning. But when we see the suffering of the cancer patients and hear their painful cries as they fight for their treatment, then no, we are not okay. So what can we do in such a situation? I remember the story of Lazarus in his hometown of Bethany. Like in Lebanon, there was a crisis and the suffering, there was death. When Martha was tested by this death, she had faith, but her faith was limited to what she had learned before. She could not have imagined that Jesus would raise Lazarus from the dead. So what is our faith like? Are we limited by what we've seen before? Faith grows in pain. We learn to surrender to Him. When we feel helpless, we then fix our eyes on Him and we plant a seed of hope. Because for us, to live is Christ and to die is gain. So no, we are not okay, but we're focused on Him and we're worshiping Him in the storm.
Some of you might have recognized my colleague Rosette, and some of you might be surprised to what they're hearing. For those of you who have visited Lebanon, it's a decent middle-income country. People have a decent standard of living. And then this. I'm going to share with you 3 crises, 3 failures, and 3 challenges, and I'll try to be very brief. The first is an economical and a social failure. As you've heard and as you've seen, poverty has reached 70%. Because of currency devaluation, because people have run out of job. Unemployment is reaching 50%. We have a political failure. Our government has failed to do any reform for the past 2 years and are adopting a strategy of laissez-faire. We just leave things to be. We still cannot agree what we should be as a country and as a nation and what our future should look like. But most importantly, we have a moral failure. Our politicians have adopted the stance of it's somebody else's fault. Or a more cynical stance, somebody will come eventually and bail us out. But also we've realized that corruption is not only at the political level, it's in the heart of each and every one of us. The reason why there is fuel crisis is people are hoarding fuel, suppliers are hoarding fuel because when subsidies will be removed, they'll be able to sell them at a much higher price. And people are doing this to their fellow countrymen in full knowledge. Moral failure. 3 challenges. The first one is exodus. And I would like to pull back a bit away from Lebanon and look at the region and notice that there has been an exodus of Christians in the Middle East. Take Iraq, for example. In 2003, there were 1.3 million Christians living in Iraq. Today, they are less than 300,000. Same thing in Palestine and Israel. Same goes for Syria. And now it's starting in Lebanon. And the crisis has amplified and accelerated this trend. Our country has become a land of broken dreams. People are not fleeing war as they're used to. They're fleeing despair. And this is creating a major debate within the church today. A lot of our countrymen are fleeing. A lot of church members are leaving. Pastors are leaving abroad. And some say, we have a calling to stay here. We have a mandate here. And some, understandably, are seeking better living conditions for their families, for their loved ones. I don't have an answer to that, and probably we can debate theologically about that. Should we stay? Should we leave? But this also has a lot of implications as we reflect upon the church. The cradle of Christianity is being emptied out of its Christians. But this means that the church tomorrow will be essentially constituted of non-Christians. So what church should look like for them? How are we preparing the ground for the church in 10, 20 years when it won't be a cultural Christianity anymore? Second challenge. For 10 years, the most vulnerable in our society has been refugees. Today, it's everybody. And for a long time, pastors and workers and church members have been the hands and feet of Christ with refugees. But today, they need to be cared for as well. How can they care for others if nobody's caring for them? So the definition of who's vulnerable just exploded. And I would like to say a thank you from the bottom of my heart to the EBF, who enabled us to support workers, to support pastors, to stay and serve and be the light of Christ. Finally, the third challenge, and probably the most difficult one, is when we look at the situation with the lenses of realism, political realism, we see that there is no light in the end of the tunnel. Refugees are not going anywhere. They're here to stay. And the situation is going to deteriorate further. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. So where do we go from here? Do we keep on expecting the light and trying to keep a positive attitude and mentality? No. The answer is stop waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel, but think how you can be the light for others inside the tunnel. I don't think we are leaving the tunnel anytime soon. And so, how can we be this light? Can we do it while we stay in our ivory towers within our churches and pray for God to help the poor, to help the needy? Do we talk about God's love, or do we live out God's love? Do we show it practically? You want to be heard when you share the gospel with people around you? You need to live out the gospel first. We have a major credibility gap that we need to bridge. We talk about all the nice things that the Bible teaches. When before a meal we pray for the poor, but do we live these out? And this is where we discovered the value of having a ministry of presence, a ministry of tears, and also a ministry of truth. And when we reflect on the death of Lazarus, Martha and Mary said the exact same statement to Christ: if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. And for the exact same statement, Jesus had two different responses. To Martha, he had a deep theological discussion, a ministry of truth, but with Mary he shed tears. A ministry of tears. And this is what incarnational ministry is all about. And we ask God for the wisdom to know when to have a ministry of truth and when to have a ministry of presence and of tears. And this is the beauty of combining proclamation and demonstration of the gospel. We've put on the lenses of realism and realized that there is no light at the end. But how about we put on the lenses of faith and surrender to God, as we've heard Rosette say? How about I tell you about the stories of people from a Christian background coming to faith, being baptized publicly, things that we have never imagined. For a long time it was mainly refugees coming to know Christ. But God broke our country. He broke a prideful, and I'm allowed to say this, an arrogant people. And he's calling and attracting people to himself. We could have never imagined, as a small minority in a very complex country where the big Catholic Church would call us to partner, would call us for help, would call us to think together how we can work together. We would have never thought that in the midst of this bleak environment, we could hear about church plantings in Druze areas. I think in every situation we should not waste a crisis. Waste a crisis to be changed first, but also to offer the greatest hope that there exists, the hope of Christ. The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few, but above all, my power is perfected in weakness. And it is when we are weak and broken and depleted that God can use us. Thank you.